me just a second here. And I am setting things up so I can do this properly. And let's grab this and pull up top side. Hello, and thank you. For those of you who aren't quite aware of what William was talking about last Tuesday, shortly before the broadcast, well, what would have been the broadcast if my cable hadn't gone out, I started a new Kickstarter, The Green Tide. And within 24 hours it was funded. It's currently at just over 4,000 out of 2,500. It's 5,000 outlets. And that's part of what we're doing today. And as well as dealing with an over affectionate cat. Really. You had to come by, didn't you? You just had to come by, didn't you? Anyway, what we're going to be doing today is I have made the wolf for my Goblin Wolf Riders. But it's just the basic shape, and it's rigged. It's not furry yet. I need to make the detail scope for it. We're going to do that as what's known as a high definition work. Okay, that's, hold on a second, put him down. There we go. Two. Okay, that's something that's, I'm working on something that was suggested to me to clear up everything, so let's change this to there. Okay, how's this for the audio? Did that fix the issue? Do you mind, little baby boy? Ugh. Did that fix the audio issue? Okay. Crazy cat. Oh, down you go. Shoot. Go. Anyway, like I said, I have the wolf modeled and rigged, but I don't yet have his fur detailing, and there's some shape issues that we can easily It's like he's saying, you don't need no wolf, you got me. Do you mind? No, you don't. You can't stay up here, Fuzzball. You can't stay up here. I've got to get to work on the video, okay? I swear, he's so feral. Isn't he? Don't you dare go to sleep, Furball. Ah! You can't go to sleep. Ah! Hello, Mark. You actually made it for the beginning of a show. And actually, you're close. As the title says, we're furrying a wolf. I should note, for those who are watching after the fact... For
for those who are watching after the fact on YouTube, like, subscribe, bell icon. Any cubic photon is awesome. Oh. This is the fourth time. What is up with you tonight? What is up with you? God bless. No. Get going. Shoo. Oh yes, I have such a feral cat. Wait a minute, did I just see? No, I didn't. Okay. No. The other one's not down here. Alright. Just so that it'd be easier for him not to intervene. Wake him. Now, there's a debate about these. Is it wake 'em or whack 'em? I've heard both from official sources. I'm so confused. Anyway, so he left a shed claw shell in my shirt. Anyway, what we're going to start with is I took this. This is my wolf. Now, obviously, there's some things like the jaw that needs to get tweaked. The tail is a little thin. And in general, he's kind of smooth-skinned and looks more like a Doberman on steroids than he does like a wolf. Well, that's because I also exported it to ZBrush. And we're going to be using ZBrush to draw on the fur and do things like thicken the jaw area and make the tail a bit bushier. And that is how we're going to furify our wolf. Bow wow, bow wow wow, bow wow. That's been my tablet for a while. Since longer than I've been doing this show, let's put it that way. Okay. Now, one of the things we're going to do is that for most of this, we're going to want it parallel. So I hit X, and you'll notice that the second dot showed up. There's two dots now, moving opposite each other. That way, most of what I do on this side will be done on the other side as well. But there's also, when we get to the center areas, we're going to turn off that symmetry. And the same thing with the center bottom areas. The reason for this is that way we won't have to worry about, looking too symmetrical. Now, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to go to the clay buildup tool with the roundy alpha. And we're also going to turn on backface masking. Then, before we do anything else, we're going to turn on the size per brush and inflate, and turn on backface masking on inflate. Now, before we do anything else, there's a couple areas we are going to inflate, specifically tail. Alright, that's a problem. It was too centered. Yeah, we need to be a bit more like here. Nope, I know what it is. Turn off the backface masking while we're doing this. Whoop. And then we can just sit here and enlarge. Because that backface masking was causing it to get a sharp drop off. Going to make the tail a little bit thicker. Also where the tail meets the body, a little bit thicker. Now we're going back to our clay buildup tool. Closing this little window here. We're going to shrink the size of the brush. This is going to be for our larger shapes and locks. And one of the places it's going to go is here. We're going to get more of a... I'm going to get the jawline a little bit thicker. And kind of back this way a little bit. We're also going to go ahead, we're going to go to stroke. Make sure we got that lazy mouse off, which we didn't. Now we're going to smooth it out a little bit just to... Okay. Now we're going to kind of give it just some basic shapes. That head is looking a lot more wolf-like, but not as vicious. We're going to fix that. We're now going to add in just some basic fur. Again, we're going to come back in and get rid of some of the symmetry there. Also going to kind of pull it out this way. And we're just going to kind of give it just some extra little slashes. It's already looking a lot more wolf-like. And that's our primary goal, is to make him look like a wolf. We're also going to kind of build up around the paw area. A little rough on the back. Same down here. Move that area there. Okay, now, that was just to give a basic shaping. Now, we're going to go ahead, we're switching to slash, turning off lazy mouse, add 8, well let's say 7, make it bigger. We're going to use this. Alright, we need a little bit stronger than that. Alright, now let's make it a little bit lighter. Just by following kind of those same paths that we made with the clay build-up brush, we can kind of build up more of a furry look. don't want to start at the same place, kind of bring it in a little bit differently. And we're just going to kind of do this just for right now. This is kind of our basic fur area. We're also going to come in and do something similar down the center line on both sides with the division. Then we're going to go back in and start making some of these areas deeper, some of them a little bit less deep. This is just to get our shapes in, get our shape language going, or our detail shapes, that is. Okay, frame out. It's already looking pretty shaggy. But Scoob, we don't really need to do everything shaggy. Some parts need to be less shaggy. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and add in a subtraction. And we're gonna sit here and add in some divisions in the deeper areas. Now, what we're going to do is after we get these basics done on the sides, we're going to go back in with the symmetry turned off and do the top center and back center. Size comparison, not yet. What I can do... Alright, this is the boar. Alright, this is the wolf. Let's import one of the boars. Let's import the standing boar. Where is it? Boar horde riding boar 01. And we're gonna parameters. We're gonna X translate it, and then frame. As you can see, the boars are a little bit bigger than the wolves. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then we're going to load in an orc. Whereas, well, a human and turn him into an orc. That's a human. And then an orc. So the orc can ride the boar, but it would look goofy on the wolf. If we then turn it into a goblin, which is actually easier because I've already got a pre-saved goblin. There. He looks a lot more comfortable on that boar. On that wolf, rather. That's about the best way to do a demonstration of the sizes. Until I get done with actually making them and I can show them off. Let's go back here. Yes, wargs are big. Wargs are dire wolves to the nth degree. They've been bred to be bigger and bigger and bigger by whatever dark power has decided that goblins ride wolves, besides J.R.R. Tolkien. Okay. Alright, the frame. Not just the basics on our fur. We're going to come back in later and do more, but right now we need to do the basics down the center of the spine, and for that we need to turn off symmetry. Now, back to clay buildup, and we're going to come here and just kind of pull back a bit. See, we don't even have to do a lot of work on that center. We just have to make sure it doesn't look like it's perfectly parallel. You know? And then on the center, similar, on here, similar things. We're just going to come down. Now the center on the chest is going to end up a lot shaggier than on the back. We're actually going to kind of pull it out a bit more down here. Now, we're going to go ahead and just start doing this. Okay, now we go back to our slash brush. We add 9. And we're going to draw on the tops of these little tufts. The tail is going to be the last thing we're going to touch, by the way. Now, and coming in. And then once again bring this kind of out. A little shaggier than the back, but not dramatically so. Not like the neck or the back of the head. And while we're here, let's go ahead and Z-sub back to 14. And we're going to kind of just... Okay. And we're going to do them up here now. And this should pretty much get us to where we need to be for the next step, other than, of course, the tail. And that is, we're going to use the rake tool. Now, one thing we gotta do, we gotta turn on the lazy mouse just so we can change the lazy step to 0.05. No. No furball. Go on. I managed to stop the cat in time. We're going to subtract, drop it down in intensity, and increase the size. We're just going to kind of... Well, let's turn off lazy mouse. Just going to kind of stroke down each of these. The rake tool is based on a tool used in sculpting that actually is like a fork-shaped item. I'm just going to kind of lightly come over each of these bits. And then we're going to go ahead and do the top. We want to try and do it so that it's either on the sides or straight down top of these tufts. Straight down top because the center will match up with the center of the tuft we've already given it. Now, X. To make it symmetrical, I'm going to make one slight size increase just for the sake of while we're doing this. Whoop, that one didn't do that well. So, as you can see, it's already starting to look a lot furrier just by adding this little touch. No, cat. Go. It's getting the furrier look while keeping these bigger, shaggier aspects. The rake tool is a very situational tool. In some forms of fur, there's no way I would use it. In this form, because we're kind of simultaneously doing, you know, the wild look. Okay. Now we're going to see, that looks nice and long furred already. It's looking really nice. We're going to shrink the mouse, and we're going to do the fur coming down the head. We're also going to kind of give a little bit in the ear. There. Already looks a lot more wolfy than it did before. I mean, compare this with that. Kind of hard to see, so let's go ahead and just to make it easier to see, let's change its diffuse colors to white. I mean, here we have an attack dog. Maybe. Here we have more wolfy. We have furried up our wolf. But we still need to work on the tail. Okay. So, one thing is, we can do that, but now we can work on the tail. Now, the way we're going to do it, we're not going to bother with the clay buildup. We're just going to use the slash tool for this. And we're going to turn off symmetry entirely. And, well, too strong. I drop down to 7. And actually, no, we need to make the mouse smaller and increase the intensity. And we're just kind of drawing little strokes. And we, like I said, we're just drawing on these little slashes. We're also now going to subtract 19. We're just going to kind of just blend into this little furry bit here. Okay. And then coming that way. Now let's frame out and see how it's looking so far. It's not looking too bad. But from now is when we're going to bring in the clay buildup, and we're going to make it smaller. And we're going to kind of trail across the ends of some of these areas. Oh, that one is not what I wanted. Okay. Get over there. Good girl. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, now rake. Once again, we're going to draw on in the direction of the tops of these strokes. This is going to be the tail end of the fur. And then we're going to start work on some further detailing of the wolf. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the move topological tool and shrink it kind of. Grab the tip and pull it just a bit, just to make it a little bit sharper on the tip. And our base wolf is furry. Right. Now, we're going to do a couple other things. For example, looking at it, those eyes will be a nightmare. So using the regular move tool, we're going to kind of slowly start making them a little bit bigger. Like this. Actually, X, we're going to Made them a little bit bigger and easier to spot. And then we'll worry about that in a minute. Now, we need to make this snout a bit snarlier. So we're going to go back to slash, but we're reducing the subtraction size. Now, and then we're going to draw in just a couple dots. Now, the next thing is, these teeth won't print. We need to make them exaggeratedly thicker. So we're going to polygroups, autogroup, because what we want is we want to hide the body and the eyes. The eyes are multi-part, that's why it's doing that. Okay, now let's hide the gums. Okay, now we're going to go to masking and inverse the mask. And now we're going to start inflating them. Not under geometry, under deformation. And we're going to play around with the slider until it looks suitable without doing that. Alright, what's going to happen is we're going to get to 4. Then we're going to use move topological. We're going to grab the bottom of this tooth and pull it diagonally up. Okay, now the thing is, a lot of what's going to happen inside that mouth is going to be dealt with after it's been posed and fused into a printable version. This is about as detailed as it can get. Any more than this, and not only will it not really print all of the detail on it, it'll also be very difficult to paint. Right now, as it is, we've got some larger strokes like these puffs on the chest, puffs going down the back of the neck here, and then the smaller strokes we did with the rake brush. Now, this is a high density morph, or intended to be a high density morph. This is not intended to be the final figure. Now, one thing I've noticed is that this front elbow is looking a little thin. So what we're going to do, we're going to make the mouse just a little bit bigger, not quite all the way over. And we're going to out there, and out there, and out here. And then from the front, we're going to kind of drag the front out just a bit. And back here, we're going to drag it out a good bit more to represent fur that's bent back. Okay, there we go. And we've got that front elbow fixed. Now, we're going to export this. And we're going to save it right as its original name. Yes, it already exists. We want to save it. Now, we're going back from here to there. And what we're going to do, this tool right here, this is something that cannot be done yet unless you are working for Daz. Oh, not that one. This one. We're going to choose the morph files, which is under goblins, wolves, wolf morph. We're going to reverse deformations. Yes, that's in case any minor changes. Property group. We're going to put it under create this under HD mods. Delta tolerance. The delta tolerance is how many fractions of a unit it will move. I actually want it to be at least 3 zeros there. Morph subdivision. Yes. You will not see that unless you're a DAS PA. Built resolution is 3. Now we hit accept. And it will take a while. Created morph successfully. Okay. Now to double check it to make sure it didn't go haywire. Yep, there we go. There is our wolf. Our big, shaggy, nasty, evil wolf. Whee! So what we're going to do now is we're going to set it back to 0. We're then going to take it and change the parameters so that the minimum is 0. We don't want to see what a negative fur would do. Now, if we go to 50%, it's not quite as shaggy, not quite as mean looking, but the detail's also a lot more subtle, a lot harder to get. The teeth are also smaller. So it's all one morph. That's our savage, vicious wolf there. Now we've got to make sure that we save that. So File, Save As, Support Asset. Oh, wait, let's change it to 0 first, so it doesn't auto-load with it on. File, Save As, Support Asset, Morph Assets. That's this third one in the list. Valendar, and then we're going to exclamation point, miniatures. Under Fenris Wolf, HD mods, Wolf Morph HD, accept. Now it's going to take a while. Oh, it took shorter than I expected. But yeah, that is the basis that we're going to be putting our wolves. Unlike the boar, there's not going to be any armor on the wolves. The wolf riders aren't even going to be using saddles. They're just going to be jumped on the back of a wolf and are holding on for dear life. Whoa, not that. Go away. That. So, that was part 1. We furified the wolf. Part 2 for tonight, we're going to do some more questions and answers, and we're going to talk about the Green Tide and things like that. Audiobooks voiceover? What do you mean by audiobooks voiceover? Do you expect me to do it? Go ahead and close Daz Studio and ZBrush because they're both using a lot of resources with that many polygons. That was 2.5 million polygons on that wolf. So yeah, he'll definitely need to get decimated. Decimated. Before printing. I would like to remind you, I used to do amateur voice acting. And I don't mean reading lines for a mod like this, like I've heard in some mods for Skyrim. Alright, how about this? I'll pull a random page from the Defense of Duffer's Drift, one of the driest, most boring books that ever existed, whose only purpose in existing is that it's an excellent tactical analysis of a small Civil War era battle. Let's see how well I can make it sound. Okay. Bookmarks. Don't ask why I've got it bookmarked. Just read this book online, and I'm just going to drag it halfway down. Again, did I find myself facing the same problem, this time with 10 lessons to guide me. I started off by sending out patrols as described in my last dream, but their orders are slightly different. All human beings were to be brought into our post, and any animals which could be of use to the enemy were to be shot, as we had no place for them. For my defensive post, I chose the position already described in my last dream, which seemed very suitable for the reasons already given. We consequently dug a trench similar in plan to that already described, but as I feared the possibility of guns being used against us, it was of a very different section. In plan, it faced north generally and was slightly broken forward to the front, each half being quite straight in section. It was about 3 foot 6 inches deep, with a parapet about 12 inches high in front of it. We made the trench as narrow as possible at the top, compatible with free movement. Each man hollowed out the under part of the trench to suit himself. He made his own portion of the parapet to suit his height. The parapet was about 2 foot 6 inches thick at the top, and quite steep inside, being built up out of pieces of broken anthill, which were nearly as hard as stone. Okay, how was that? Admittedly, I had never read that portion before, ever. It was just right there in front of me. By the way, snack. Trying to make something like the Defense of Duffer's Drift sound reasonable to listen to is okay. Okay, lace in ZBrush. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that. Lace in ZBrush. It's not a matter of you can't do it in ZBrush. It's a matter of printing it. Almost impossible. The closest thing you can do to lace is pinhole lace. What that is I'm just going to draw a diagram. You've got kind of a wavy cuff edge with little pokes, little pinholes, and near the top, and kind of like a couple other pinholes just to get the impression of lace. Lace is so fine that you can't really print or paint it. It has to be given more of an impression rather than the actual thing. It's like for the same reason why hair, you give waves and a few strokes instead of drawing each individual hair. It's that fine. Hello, Otto. You just missed the entirety of me turning the wolf for the goblin riders into a furry wolf. I turned him from a muscle-bound Doberman into a vicious, savage, furry winter wolf. In theory, you could probably print the wolves by themselves to use as like a winter wolf or some other lupine being. I think I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about. Let me reopen ZBrush. It'll take just a moment. And I'll import a random unsculpted figure. Okay, let me hide that. Minimize that. My biggest problem is that ZBrush, when it loads full screen, blocks off the taskbar. And I don't like that. Okay, so let's bring it back to here. And we're going to import. Let's go to Resculpt Minis, Broadcast Miniatures. Let's just grab a random. Let's grab the Bear Painting Practice body, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, frame. Zoom out just a little. No furball. No. You. Now we're going to geometry, subdivide it a few times, and Dynamesh at 768. Dynamesh. Now we're going to draw. I'm just going to draw on a cuff right up here with the masking tool. Frame in. Now, we're going to shrink the mouse quite a bit. And we're going to just kind of focal shift to 100. There. 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 You can see I'm just adding some scallops to the edge. And right here. There. We'll get pretty nice even scalloping there. And we're going down to extract. We're going to extract, and that's a bit too high for... There, that's better. Draw to remove the masking, and then on here, draw to remove the masking. We are now going to geometry. We're going to Z-remesh. Because we want to try and make it... Really? You didn't even wait for permission this time, did you? Because you knew I wasn't going to give it. Yeah, you. Not her. You. Oh, no. 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 But... You're going down on the floor. Shoo a little bit. Alright, now we're going to subdivide it a couple times. What that did was that evened up the edges there, so now when we Dynamesh it at 256... Oh, wrong. Not enough. At 768, we keep our shape and we can subdivide it again. Then I would go to Layer. Layer. Subtract. And then make sure to turn off Lazy Mouse. Change this from stroke to drag dot, and we're going to shrink it quite a bit. And then we want to give the impression of lace, so we're only going to give the largest of the holes, which is going to be one. That's not enough. We need it a lot deeper. Make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. There. 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 Something like this will end up reading on the figure as lace. Just putting 3 little holes like this below the scallop. One that looks like this is going around that way, and then this is just for some very basic lace-like look. Lace-like look. And now, let's say we wanted to add in just a little bit more lacy detail. We're going to go to inflate, bring that focal shift a little bit higher, and the mouse a little bit smaller. We're going to inflate the edge. Now the reason for this is some areas of lace are thicker than others. Then we're going to come in and do a double dip under these. Once again, we're not trying to do lace, we're trying to give the impression of lace. And all that needs is some kind of fancy pattern of ridges and holes. Remember, if you really want to check how your figure is going to look, zoom out. As you can see from the scale, even when we go here, it looks more like lace. It's just got that kind of frilly look. It still might not fully show. It just depends on how your printer is. Either way, it's going to have a lacier look than actually trying to do real lace. I may have done it too fine here, but that style, that kind of impression is all you really need to do. Maybe do the scallops and the holes and that twice as large as I did on that little sample test figure. Okay? Okay, that's the Orb Crack brush. Those are actually available of all places on DeviantArt. I have several brushes that I have purchased or downloaded for free or created myself. For example, one of the brushes I created has things like a knot, gemstone, stylized skull, disc for things like armor. So yeah, it's just Orb Crack. You can find it easily using those two keywords. So, yes, I've made custom insert brushes. I've made custom alphas. The chainmail alpha I made is custom. I made a similar one for scale, a similar one for stylized fur, and a similar one for, well, leaves. Because if you'll go back and look at the very first episode of this, I made a rather crude, by my current standards, elven druid whose cloak back was made to look like overlapping leaves. Excuse me. Excuse me. Not as much a rule of thumb. I go by eye. If you noticed earlier when I looked at the lace cuff that I made, I just zoomed out. If you zoom out to about the size on your monitor that the miniature will be, for the most part, you'll be able to tell what will print and what won't. If you're printing in resin, you don't have to go quite as small. You can actually go to about twice the size that the miniature will be and get a good idea of how it will look when it's printed. Perfect example is, well, let me grab this guy. The chainmail came out nicely. So did the detail on his shield. I made certain it would when I was making these bits by zooming out until they were, about yay tall. You can go more detailed than I actually do, because just remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should, and the more detailed a miniature is, the harder it is to paint. And really tiny, thin fur lines and hair lines don't paint well. They end up blending into a plastic cap. So it's a combination of eyeballing it and just experience in both painting and sculpting. This guy is one of the sample orcs from the Green Tide mentioned below. He is the sample. He is currently available on Thingiverse, although not with the tuft. That's an actual tuft of stuff that I added to the base. But yeah, I actually kind of love these. Army Painter Battlefields, Wasteland Tufts. Small, medium, and large tufts of grass. Thank you. Largash, the printed in resin. Those wrinkles he adds are large and deep enough that they will take paint. The trick is finding the limits on how large you can go, how deep you can go without it looking unnatural. He's writing the line where it's as deep as you can really get, as sharp as you can get before it becomes cartoony. A couple of them kind of go over the line, but then you've got ones like the Hill Giant, not the one with the big head, but the little one with the the one that everyone tends to paint with the face paint hand on the face. And to show you how the orcs look on the board, actually, let me, because I'm also showing off color. There. The orcs on the boards definitely fit well. Wood grain on weapon hafts looks best on the more primitive weapons. The cruder the weapon is, like the haft for the spear with the stone chipped head, I put in wood grain. The shafts for the processed metal heads, I didn't. If you really want wood grain on them, there is a way to paint it on. There's a couple techniques. There's two main techniques that I know of. The first is you paint it gray, thin white lines with thin black lines just offset beside them, and then you go over it with brown inks until it looks nice. Multiple different shades and multiple different layers. The second is a little trickier, and it requires a really old, dead brush that you can splay the bristles to, and that's you paint with retarder. You got to have this. Does not work well without retarder. You paint on a light layer ring, and then a dark ring, and then you don't even fully blend. Just go up and down once or twice with the splayed brush, and it swirls it into what looks like wood grain. Yes, I have yet to see any of Duncan's miniatures that do not print well. They might require, some really careful supports, but they all print very well on resin especially. And I've seen some amazing stuff out of FDM. That's actually something I'm thinking about having with the goblins. The butt of the spear being broken off, because it used to be an orc spear, but it was too long, so he broke the bottom so he can use it. And in case y'all haven't seen the update, I have also finished pretty much most of the heads for the goblins. The goblins are not going to be as numerous as the orcs. Just the simple fact is that they're not going to be. So here are the goblin heads. I mean, we've got we've got a couple that are screaming there's two different screaming heads actually. Some that are wearing these little furry helmets, and we've got two different types of hood. The one on the hood on this side, which is more of just the sit on top, and then the draping hoods on these three levels that are, pulled forward, and they all have little holes in the sides for the ears to poke out. No, I'm not going to add hair to the gobos because one of the things is I really follow a lot of the Warhammer design styles, and goblins and orcs in Warhammer didn't have hair unless they actually put little critters on their heads, and gobos weren't allowed to. But there's 15 heads. There's going to be 15 legs, and probably about 30 torsos. Right now, the legs, let's see, there's going to be about 16 legs. Half of them robed, half of them just legs, because, there's robed goblins going around. Warhammer called them night goblins. I really can't copy over the orc hairstyles because those were done to fit an orc head, and they're not like the clothing, they're props. If I put them on a goblin head, they'd be sitting, the little mohawk would be like this. There's one goblin type I wish I could do, because the potential for the sculpts are amazing, but I can't. Goblin fanatics. Hopped up on hallucinogenic mushroom juice, with a ball and chain as big as they are. So insane that when they get within range, the entire rest of the unit kicks them out of the unit at the enemy. And they start and they move randomly, doing an area of effect template. And if you happen to roll a 6 for movement, they embed themselves in the ground or hit themselves with their own chain, and they're gone, and here's another cat. Do you mind? Carlton. You've been up here how many times already today? How many times? No. Down you go, little buddy. Well, most of them will be spear or knife. You know, a nasty little stabby thing, or a Bowie knife, or something that's been chipped out of stone. Spears will be, crude spears. There might be a couple with, like, just basic clubs. But yeah, they're not going to be armed like, heavy slashy axes. No. There'll be a bow. They'll have short bows. Some will be like. Javelins and spears are almost interchangeable at that scale. I mean, you can say, okay, this guy's got javelins, not a spear, but yeah. And yeah, spike club, or even just a chunk of wood with a nail poking through it. Now, if by some miracle I hit 12,000, the war machines I have planned are a trebuchet, but with a catapult cup instead of a drag thing. Ammunition for the trebuchet, which includes rocks and an elf tied up and wrapped up in straps and chains with his head exposed going... He's going to be chunked. A ballista, that's the giant crossbow on the stand. A battering ram, a boar chariot, and a wolf chariot. I can do whips, but as for caster hands, casters are going to be separate. They're going to be I'm going to throw in some extra little secondary heroes and shamans if I make it to the tier with the bosses. Fireball. No. Down you go. You gotta stop this. I love you, but I'm trying to broadcast. Down you go. Anyway. I was tempted to make them ride cats. Anyway, so all three have made their appearance today. Carlton, Ralph, and Shinju. By the way, one way I used to tell the weather. You'll notice it came mostly out of this nostril and not this one. That's normal. Magical goblins, I've actually got two different orc shamans on Thingiverse. I've got one and another. Goblins aren't as developed simply because they're not as large, so if people print out the individual pieces instead of assembling them in a modeling program, they'll be very difficult to print. So, I mean, when the heads are that small, blue and place. Oh, nice. The armor is going to be a mix of leather, rags, crude plate. I don't think we're going to do chainmail, simply because goblins are weaker and cheaper and slaves to orcs, usually, at least the way I perceive them. So something as fiddly as chain would be a bit more than they could do. But having a kettle hats strapped to their chest. Or plates, just random plates just kind of lashed on. And hello, MMMG. Welcome to the tail end of the show. Well, it depends on lore. Goblins in general, in the wider world of fantasy, are the weaker race compared to orcs and, ogres and trolls. Kobolds and knockers in legend were the minors. Goblins were just little spooks. And the fact that that name is being used to refer to a humanoid race is, In D&D, they're not so much minors as they are just little crude dudes with primitive weapons. In Pathfinder, they're different, but they also have big round heads with tiny little noses and tiny little chins and big mouths. That could do, Otto. Excellent. The thing about a sling, that's going to be something that'd be hard, for something as small as they are, that'd be hard to do. Maybe just have it, and I'm holding onto it in just a loop with a rock visible, but it's actually a solid piece. We're discussing goblins when it comes to making miniatures. Pathfinder goblins, I don't like them. I don't like the look. They look like if you took one of the monsters from the movie Critters and shaved them. They don't look like goblins to me. They look like a totally different race. I mean, I've already shown how I see goblins, and it's very, very reminiscent of the Games Workshop style, where they've got the long pointy nose, the skinny face, the chin that juts out a bit, bulging eyebrows, and long skinny ears, and tiny skulls because they've got very little brain. Well, with the goblins, the entire chest and arms will be one piece. Again, they're smaller than orcs. It's not as easy to glue and fiddly bit things. So just legs, torso with arms, head. Yeah, so the slings would be one piece. And in fact, it would probably be like him holding another rock with a sling around his head. Well, there's this. Where is it? Media file. This shows the variety that the goblins already have in appearance. Now, the one in the top left is my original goblin style, and it really doesn't hold up as well, as nasty and as mean looking as the other three. So I didn't use it for those heads. Yeah, 40K would be nice, but I don't want to be sued by Warhammer, by Games Workshop. And see, as for Larg's question about expansion packs, it's possible. It's just almost every other freestanding product I've done has, except for the Tarask, has gotten like 2, maybe 3 purchases. So, but an expansion pack with new arms, new heads, maybe a additional weapons for those new arms. Maybe like a new head where he's wearing a hood, like an executioner's hood. But his jaw kind of drapes around that big old jutting orky jaw. As for probability, I give it a 5. And if I get to about 12 to 15,000 on the sales, I'll bet that raises that up. If I don't get much more than I currently have, that lowers it down. The tutorial on how to combine them in a program, I'm going to do it in Mesh Mixer, and it'll be done within the next day or two. So it would be done relatively soon. As for advertising, I'm going to try to hold back to posting once a week because that became an issue with the Titans. Other people can post however much you want to post in any other community, as long as it's not me. That was a problem I had I posted too much in some communities for the Titans, and I got banned from a couple of the 3D printing Reddits. Where is the other? It is possible to print them separately. However, when you print them separately, you can get... come on, autofocus. Yeah, if you look at this arm, you can see that gap. That can happen. There's a similar seam here, but it's not as bad. And if you look, there's not so much a seam on the neck, but there's still a little bit of a gap right there. So you can do it. It's just like with any other miniature kit, be prepared to gap fill. It's, again, those seams are not as bad as what a lot of miniatures have that you purchase in the store. But when you assemble them in your modeling program, you don't. Well, if you do get them, like this one, it just looks like a wrinkle. So that's why I recommend that you assemble them and then print, rather than print them out and fit them together. That doesn't work as well on resin. With resin, you pretty much have to use a gap filler. And right now, one of my favorites actually has it. Why is there a Green Lantern ring on this? This is a great gap filler. Sandable, primable, paintable, etc. It's modeling putty for plastic, but it works well on resin too, and even pewter figures. Excuse me. Well, even with FDM, one of the coolest things I've seen is for something like that, people using those 3D printing pens. You print it, you put it together. Once you've glued it together, use a 3D printing pen. Follow along the seams. Just fill in, and without pushing forward the filament, using the hot end of the pen to kind of smooth it out a bit, like the ironing from Cura. So, meanwhile, I wonder, Hmm. No, doesn't work. Yep. Anyway, as long as it doesn't erase detail, whatever works, works. If you think it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid. You know, the old cliche quote. 200 degrees C, slightly melts the part, but doesn't ruin it. Well, you could probably go down as low as 180 to 190, depending on what filament you used. By the way, Otto, did you take your name from Skyrim? Farkas and Vilkas. Orcs should be how you see them. D&D officially says that they are greenish brown to olive green. Warhammer has them a bit brighter green. I've seen yellow-skinned orcs, and of course, Tolkien's orcs were just swarthy elves in terms of skin tone. Ah, so that's where Farkas got his name. So Farkas and Vilkas are named after you. Now, goblins in D&D are kind of red-skinned, so are hobgoblins. But I'm a very Warhammery guy, Warhammer Fantasy, not 40k, and not Age of Sigmar. Ugh. So to me, goblins and hobgoblins are just cousins to orcs, so they're all greenskins. Either that, Otto, or they actually did their research on language. Yeah, you didn't see the wolf, did you? Let me go ahead and delete this and import horde, goblins, sculpt, wolves, wolfmorph. Just because you didn't get a chance to see it earlier, the wolf. Or rather, I should say, the warg, the evil wolf. It's actually a bit bigger than a regular wolf, a bit more werewolf-like in appearance. Yeah. Really and truly, the only animals that are suitable as mounts for human and human-sized species are horses and camels, because any other animal docile enough for us to ride isn't strong enough, fast enough, or enduring enough, or any other animal strong enough, fast enough, and enduring enough for us to ride isn't very docile. Riding boars and wolves, no way. The reality, there's no way. On the other hand, in fantasy, it's fantasy. So orcs can ride boars, dwarves, elves can ride stags, goblins can ride wolves, and in one of my favorite fantasy units from my war game, dwarves can ride bears or giant badgers. Well, elephants aren't so much a mount as much as they are a siege engine. There's actually an old Games Workshop model of a giant carrying a platform on his shoulders with dozens of goblins dangling off, firing bows, poking down with super long pikes, dumping hot oil off the back. Yeah. But I wouldn't use a humanoid as a mount because one of the big limitations of a humanoid form is speed and stability. For a mount, you want something that's quadruped or more, or maybe tripod if it's a weird alien demonic thing, simply for stability. For a mount, you want something that's, if you're on a humanoid mount, you're doing this, whereas on a quadruped, you're doing this. Bit exaggerated, but yeah. I went over this earlier. Trebuchet, ammunition, ballista, battering ram, boar chariot with orcs, wolf chariot with goblins. War drums, horns, and banners are a projected expansion. But the war machines would also include arms for the purposes of manning these war machines. No flamethrowers. Greek fires too much for them, they blow themselves up. They're stupid. And yes, I'm tapping off my vape. The thing is, the catapult, or the trebuchet, it's kind of a hybrid catapult trebuchet in plan. It's, the counterweight like a trebuchet, but a cup instead of a loop of cloth like a catapult. Or mangonel, if you prefer. Saga Age of Magic. That's a tabletop war game? If it is, I haven't heard of it before. I've heard of the Saga system, which was a tabletop role-playing game. My orcs, I'll say this, on first glance, my orcs seem large. But let's put them next to a dark elf. Orc, dark elf. They're not that much bigger. They're stockier, and they're maybe 4 to 6 inches taller. But at the layer level of the base is even, they're not that much taller. Meanwhile, this is a tribal boar rider that fell victim to a bad can of primer. I need to redo it. Now what I did was I printed with the other boar rider. I printed the boar legs. The boar and legs is one piece. The base is another, and then the entire waist up as a piece. But like I said, the primer spray can kind of, well, as you can see, it got powdered on, so it looks like he looked into the eyes of a Medusa. That is a poor casualty of a spray can dying. Largash, it'll be more than just two. Consider that it's going to be, yes, the war boss and the shaman on foot and mounted. The war boss will be on a full wyvern, and the shaman will be on a chimera, lion, dragon, goat head monstrosity. In addition, I'm probably going to have their lieutenants, 2 additional leaders and mage types. Yeah, he's not that happy about being turned into stone. Do you mind, you little furball? Crazy cat. You love your daddy? I take that as a yes. Get down there. She's sound asleep. In my lore, well, take the worst backwoods hillbilly you can think of, slightly inbred, and take away any and all fear of death.
Yeah. Oops, he's like, hey, let's stick him in the gullet and see what happened. Hold my meat and watch this.
Yeah, orcs, for what I do, they're basically they're not brainless, but they're crude and cunning more so than intelligent. In other words, mine are more like the D&D and Warhammer orcs than like Warcraft or Skyrim, Elder Scrolls. Of course, Elder Scrolls orcs are just a race of elf on steroids. The one who can beat up more of the others and say he's boss.
I'm the boss. No, I'm the boss. Shut up. See, I'm the boss.
So yeah, the thing is, I like a lot of what Warhammer did with their orcs. It makes it much more feasible. Orcs fight all their life. If they're not fighting humans or dwarves or elves, they're fighting each other just to keep fighting. And the longer an orc fights, the bigger they get. The bigger they get, the harder they fight. And the biggest become the leaders.
Meanwhile, goblins are like the sneakiest. but sometimes goblin tribes get slaved by orcs. And poor little goblins become, no, go get this, go get that. I'm gonna stab him in the kidney one of these days, and woo, woo, woo. Oh, never mind. Wait, what's that coming over here for? What does he mean he's hungry? Oh no, chomp.
The most intelligent, strategically thinking orcs become shamans. Because no orc wants to fight a shaman. So that way the shamans don't have to fight each other. They're like,
I'm studying. Yeah, you don't want to get me when I'm studying. I just ate this mushroom. I could explode any minute now. Bye.
And I think that there's no way to tell whether an orc is male or female. Other orcs can tell, but only when they're in the mood. We don't want to know when orcs get in the mood. And we won't want to know how they can tell a male from a female, because apparently there's nothing on first glance. Orcs are hunter-gatherers at most. They are not farmers. They would hunt and they would forage, but they would not farm. The only reason that they have the weapons and armor they have is that it's often scavenged from some other race and like hammered out to stretch to fit them. Although, on occasion, more intelligent races who enslave orcs will provide them with higher quality gear. If orcs fish, they spearfish. They don't have the patience for a rod and reel. Orcs, well, they do, but it's not so much forging as taking a chunk of iron and pounding it into shape with raw force, and if it breaks, tossing it at the goblins. War machines are often captured war machines made by other races that have had orky implements added to them. One of the things I picture is that orcs have very little pain receptors. They don't feel pain the way most other races do, which is why they tend to be a little bit tougher. It also means that they find it funny when somebody or something gets hurt, because they're not really hurt. It don't hurt.
Oh, he fell off a cliff. Ooh, did you see that? I hit him right in the chest with my mace. Oh, that was funny.
Ooh. It's probably every tribe has their own little patron entity. They might worship it as a god, but it might secretly be, it might really be a demon. It might be just a little tiny little imp that has amazed them with little bits of magic and its ability to phase out of existence and phase back in. It might be a dragon. They might even worship a very powerful ogre as a god of eating. Mm-hmm. Orc scientific method is,
did it work? Yeah, you done good. Did it work? No.
That's the orc scientific method. Orcs aren't bright. They're pretty gullible. A necromancer could easily convince orcs that he's a god because
he brought Golbash back from the dead. I saw him. Not as talkative as usual, though, and I think that's because his jaw fell off.
Things like that. If they're not fighting, they're not happy. They don't like having to go out and find food. They don't like, doing whatever chores need to be done around the village. Which is why they often capture goblins as slaves to do all that for them. So, when there's fighting to be had, they're active as all get out. Otherwise, yeah, they tend to be kind of lazy. Like I said, picture the worst backwoods hillbilly you can. I don't mean the average redneck, because they do tend to have a little bit of a work ethic. I mean a hillbilly. If they ain't, shooting something or making the hooch, yeah, It also could be finally revealed one day that goblins are actually juvenile orcs. But they're not. The way I look at it is the runtlings, as they're called, are kept back at their home village, stuffed into one big old tent or something like that. They're stuck all day with each other, and that's why they hate each other and they fight all the time. And the ones that survive 10 years are adults. Kick them out.
Here, here's your spear, and go poke something. You want something better? Kill someone and take it from them.
Pull that tail out. So, yeah. The thing to remember is it's difficult to picture a race that is innately evil. The reason for that is evil is so subjective. What is evil to one culture, such as to a modern day culture, rape is very evil. To another culture, like, most of the more primitive tribes of Europe, it was part of doing business when you raided and sacked a town, was you raped all the women. But even murder, sacrificial killings, to us is an evil thing. But to certain Mesoamerican cultures, it was needed to be done in order to keep the sun from falling or freezing in space and being eaten. Ooh. Well, I still haven't printed out my own version of the painting practice mini. I have sliced up a bed full of them to be printed later. I've still got quite a few orcs that I haven't gotten around to painting yet. But, yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. Depending on how well... All right. Okay, Largash first, then Otto. Largash. Yes, actually. I've printed some miniatures where their arm was so close to their torso, it was hard to paint underneath the arm. And that, made me wish I had that arm out a little bit further. And Otto, I have two. I have a CR10, which, good old FDM printing. And I have an Anycubic Photon for resin. And pretty much I've printed out my giants in resin, like this guy. But I also, the ones that are part of the Titans, I also printed them out in FDM, just to show it could be done in both. And when I printed terrain, I printed in FDM, not in resin, because that's way too much. Oh, CR10 and under 3. No. Little furball started crouching to start jumping over here. I don't use Cura or Simplify 3D. When I slice for the CR10, I use Craftware. Manual supports, but no adaptive layer height yet. Craftware. Anyway, Craftware's interface looks very, very mid-90s, but it does a really good job. It doesn't have some of the bells and whistles, but like I said, manual supports, especially when making miniatures, is a godsend. Excuse me. Now, it is 5 minutes till. Yeah, 5 minutes till 10 local time. Sunday at 1, I should have a Patreon sculpt. I know it's been a couple weeks, but I've had so many people join the Patreon. I send them the message saying, okay, let's schedule you a time to do your sculpt, and I never hear back from them. So if you're watching this after the fact, and you're on my Patreon, and have not yet had your patron sculpt, message me on Patreon, please. There's not really any such thing as a non-standard slicer. Pretty much you've got Slick 3R, Cura, Craftware, KISS, Simplify 3D. There's really not many other slicers that are... Simplify 3D, take it out, because I'm not going to pay for a slicer. Not when Cura and Craftware are both pretty much do everything. Oh, excuse me. As for the resin, the Ender 3, I use both Situ Box and the Photon Slicer. Situ Box is better at the supports. If I had like a hand shaped like that, I needed supports here. The Photon Slicer lays that support up against the arm so that it fuses with the arm. Situ Box pokes it out and down and avoids hitting other pieces. But when it comes to the actual slicing time, Situ Box occasionally skips layers or has a flash much larger than the layer. So you get a little ring like a third of the way up or whatever. So I'll create the supports in Situ Box and export the whole thing as an STL, bring it into the Photon Slicer for the actual slicing. Thinking about it, I guess Craftware could be considered a non-standard slicer because it's not as popular as Cura, Slick 3R, or Simplify 3D. So, getting some soda pop. Any videos in printing? No, I have not. Not yet. The way I look at it, there's so many videos like that out there already that I would just be one more voice in the wilderness. There's not as many regular videos on the sculpting process. Plus, I have done other videos for things like anatomy, proportion, and matters like that. I also recently did one on gaming in general about theater of the mind versus maps and minis, when you would use each one. And of course, coming up in the next day or two, I'll be doing a video on how to assemble the orcs in Mesh Mixer. And then Mesh Mixer and 3D Studio Max. I don't own Blender, but the similar techniques would be used. Basically involves just loading in the parts, moving the joint centers for the arms so that you can rotate them if you want, and kind of moving them in a fraction of a millimeter, moving the head down a fraction of a millimeter. Yeah. The orcs are boars. The goblins are wolves. The actual sculpts for the entire product are done. The sculpts for the stretch goals are not done yet. They're in process. There's 5 boars, by the way. Standing boar, the running boar, like this, where its left legs are out and the right legs are in. Mirror imaged where it's opposite but the helm is different. And then with and without helm and saddle. So that the without is for like the tribal orcs and the with is for the more, traditional orcs. Alright. And it is now 10 o'clock exactly, which means it's time for me to say goodnight. I have a couple things I have to do once I get out of here. So, I'm going to hold up my hand, and I'm going to count from 5 to 1. When I get to 1, then I'm going to say something goofy and then go, and when I see the I'm going bye-bye. Cyclopses are just, just another kind of giant to them.
It's a giant.
And that entirely depends, do they feel froggy? Do they want to jump on that giant, or do they want to go, let's go around? So, anyway, let's get that hand up there. Now, the reason why I do this, after I stop my hiccups, is because there's somewhere between a 10 and a 15 second lag on YouTube that YouTube in itself has. And so this lets me make sure I don't shut down the broadcast in the middle of a sentence going out. So that's going to be a 5, 4, 3, a 2, and a 1. You know how you get embarrassed when you hear yourself talking in a recording? Do you think that Morgan Freeman or James Earl Jones ever goes, yeah.